Welcome to another Take 5. I'm doing some devotional reading tonight, and I'm reading out of the book of Numbers, where God sent in 12 spies to survey the land that he had promised to his people. And they came back and they brought a report back to the leaders. 10 of them were sure that it was most certainly a doom for God's people. 2 of them were very confident, Joshua and Caleb. And that night, the people rallied together and they formed a rebellion. Now, we know the result from the story is that God had those rebellious people wander in the wilderness until that entire generation was gone, save Caleb and Joshua. And several things we learn from this account. First of all is this: just because a majority of the people believe it does not make it true. 10 of the people, verses 2, 10 said, no way, we can't do it, we're going to die. Only 2 felt like it could be done. We see that in our world so often today. Just because a majority of people may believe that the sanctity of life or the sanctity of marriage is not important, it doesn't make it true, because God is the creator of both of those. But you know what? A lie does not become truth just because a majority of people believe it. Second thing we realize is that it does take courage to stand up against the crowd. It takes courage to stand up against a world that does not honor God, a world that has its own set of values and its own ideas and its own belief system. As the people rebelled that night, the word says that Joshua and Caleb tore their clothes. No, God is giving us this land. We can do it. And it took great courage for them to stand up against that crowd. And there will be times when you and I have to take a stand against the crowd, against the world. Then we also learn this: fear and disobedience has its consequences. For those people who felt like, we can't do this, this is most certainly death. For those 10 and the crowd that they stirred up, God said, here's the punishment. You're going to wander in this wilderness until this whole generation is dead and gone. You will die in the wilderness. Folks, you and I have a decision to make. We have to live a life of faith and obedience to God, and if we choose not to, it has its consequences. And those consequences most certainly include not only physical death, but spiritual death. And when we choose to live a life that does not have faith as a part of it, when we choose to live a life of disobedience to God, we're going to find ourselves wandering in the wilderness. And in the wilderness alone we will die. And God does not want that for anyone. Because then the other lesson we learn is that faith and obedience are always rewarded by God. Joshua and Caleb, because their faith, because of their courage, because they were willing to come back and say, we can do this, God will give us this land, God honored that faith. He honored that obedience. And He will do the same in our life. And the last thing, the last reminder I want to give us is this: evil is great, but God is greater. There were giants living in the land, but guess what? That didn't matter, because God was bigger, God was stronger, God was greater. So my prayer is that you and I will live a life of faith and obedience, knowing that our God is on the throne. He loves us. He has great things in store for us, and He asks us to trust Him and to follow Him each and every day.